Jae-wook, they're trying to take everything. I'm ready to come home. My voice barely held together as rain soaked through my clothes, sitting on the cold steps outside the Lee estate. Tears blurred my vision. He didn't ask questions. "Don't move," he said with that tone that meant someone was about to pay. 15 minutes. I ended the call, knowing he'd arrive, but unsure I could last that long. 15 minutes stretched endlessly. My shattered mahogany cane lay in pieces around me, where Mina had smashed it before telling me to disappear. My family's laughter echoed from the ballroom, celebrating her perfect engagement while I sat forgotten in the storm. The party was taking photographs when a black sedan appeared, and every sound stopped. Seoul knew what that vehicle meant. Jae-wook emerged like controlled fury in tailored black, his gaze sweeping past everyone until it found me, alone, soaked, crying. He ignored Mina in her expensive dress, ignored my parents who treated me like their greatest failure, ignored hundreds of witnesses suddenly realizing they were watching something catastrophic. He came directly to me, knelt in the rain, touched my face and said, "I've got you now," before lifting me up, while my family finally understood their mistake. The door shut with a sound like sanctuary, like something terrible ending and something uncertain beginning. Jae-wook's fingers wrapped around mine instantly while we drove away from the estate. I trembled uncontrollably. Despite my humiliation at him witnessing my complete breakdown, he remained silent, simply holding my hand while I fell apart. When I managed to look up, his expression hurt to see. Not pity, but something fiercer. I said nothing, just thought back to our beginning, how a disabled Omega nobody wanted had become precious to Seoul's most feared man. 3 months earlier, I'd been a ghost. Not figuratively. Actually invisible to my own family. The Lee household ran on a very specific hierarchy, and I existed somewhere below the houseplants. At least the orchids in the sunroom got watered regularly and received compliments from visitors. I got neither. My typical day started at 5 in the morning when Mina would text me a list of tasks that needed completing before she woke up at 9. The texts were never polite requests. They were commands, often punctuated with reminders that I was living in her house on her family's charity, despite the fact that I was born a Lee just like her. That morning, 3 months ago, the list was particularly long. She needed her dry cleaning picked up from the luxury district, her yoga instructor's payment delivered in cash because she didn't trust electronic transfers, and her apartment deep cleaned before Sang-hoon arrived for dinner. Oh, and she needed me to pick up a specific brand of sparkling water that was only sold at one boutique grocery store on the other side of the city. I looked at my phone, then at my mahogany cane leaning against my bed, then at my leg that was already aching before I'd even stood up. The injury had happened 2 years ago in a car accident that Mina had been driving during, though she'd somehow walked away without a scratch while I'd spent 6 months in physical therapy learning to walk again. She never apologized. She never even acknowledged it. In the Lee family version of events, I'd always had a limp, and it was just another inconvenience I brought to their otherwise perfect lives. I got dressed in my usual clothes, the ones that Mina had declared acceptable for running errands, which meant they were several years out of date and definitely not the designer labels she wore. I grabbed my cane and started the day. The dry cleaning pickup went smoothly enough, though the staff at the luxury boutique clearly wondered why someone like me was collecting clothes for someone like Mina. I could see the question in their eyes, the same question I saw everywhere. Why did the beautiful, successful sister have such a disappointing sibling? The yoga instructor lived in a penthouse in Gangnam, and the elevator was broken, which meant I had to climb 8 flights of stairs with my cane and my aching leg to deliver an envelope of cash. The instructor didn't even thank me. She just took the money and closed the door in my face. By the time I got to Mina's apartment to clean, my leg was screaming and I was fighting back tears of frustration. But I cleaned anyway, scrubbing floors and dusting shelves and making sure everything was perfect because I knew if it wasn't, Mina would make my life even more miserable than it already was. I was finishing up when she arrived with Sang-hoon, her fiancé, who was exactly the kind of man you'd expect Mina to choose. Wealthy, handsome, arrogant, and completely convinced that his money made him superior to everyone around him. "Oh, you're still here," Mina said when she saw me putting away the cleaning supplies. She said it like I was an unwelcome pest, rather than her brother who'd just spent 6 hours running her errands and cleaning her home. "I'm just finishing," I said quietly, gathering my things. Sang-hoon looked me up and down with barely concealed disgust. "This is your brother? The one you've been telling me about? Unfortunately, Mina said with a laugh that cut like glass. Mother insists we keep him around. Something about family obligation. He looks like he's about to fall over, Sang-hoon observed, gesturing at my cane. Maybe you should get him a wheelchair. At least then he'd be out of the way. They both laughed at that, like my disability was a punchline to a joke I wasn't in on. I didn't respond. I'd learned years ago that defending myself only made things worse. I just picked up my bag, grabbed my cane, and headed for the door. Don't forget the sparkling water, Mina called after me. I need it for tonight's dinner party, and make sure you use the service entrance when you come back. I don't want the guests seeing you. I took the subway to the boutique grocery store, my leg throbbing with every step. The sparkling water cost more than I spent on groceries in a week, but I bought it with the credit card Mina had given me specifically for her errands. The card that she monitored obsessively and would interrogate me about if I spent even a single one on myself. When I returned to her apartment building, I obediently used the service entrance like she'd instructed. The service elevator was older and slower, and it smelled like garbage. But at least I didn't have to risk running into any of her wealthy friends who might ask uncomfortable questions about why Mina's brother looked like he'd been run over by life. I left the sparkling water in her kitchen and headed home to the Lee estate, where I had my own small room in the servants' wing. Not because I was treated like a servant, my mother always insisted, but because my room was more private back there. The fact that it was also smaller, colder, and farther from the rest of the family was apparently just a coincidence. That night, I lay in bed with my leg elevated and an ice pack on my knee, staring at the ceiling and wondering how much longer I could keep doing this, how much longer I could endure being invisible in my own family, how much longer I could pretend that their cruelty didn't hurt. I didn't know then that everything was about to change. I didn't know that in 2 days, my father would call me into his study and give me a task that would either kill me or save me. I didn't know that I was about to meet Shin Jae-wook, and that the most feared man in Seoul would look at me and see something other than a broken, disappointing Omega who wasn't worth anyone's time. All I knew was that I was tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of enduring. Tired of being virtuous in a family that saw virtue as weakness. But I'd survived this long. I could survive another day. I had to. Or at least that's what I told myself when my father summoned me to his study 2 days later with a sealed envelope and an impossible task. We need this document delivered to Shin Jae-wook by tomorrow morning, he said without preamble. You'll take it. Everyone in Seoul knew about Shin Jae-wook, the king of the city's underworld, the man who controlled everything from legitimate business empires to the criminal networks beneath respectable society's surface. Why me? I asked, though I already knew the answer. My father's expression was carefully neutral. Because you're expendable. If something goes wrong, it won't affect Mina's engagement or the family's reputation. If Shin Jae-wook decides to kill the messenger, better it's you than someone important. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed imagining all the ways this suicide mission could end, and somewhere around 3 in the morning, I realized maybe disappearing into Shin Jae-wook's fortress would be better than continuing to exist as a ghost in my own family. At 8 the next morning, I took the subway to his compound. Security cameras tracked my approach from every angle. Guards in expensive suits watched me from the gate. The walk from the entrance to the main building felt like the longest journey of my life. A man in a black suit led me through hallways that felt more like a museum than a home, finally stopping at massive double doors. Lee Hyun-soo, to see you, sir. Send him in, a voice said from inside, deep and commanding. I stepped into the office and saw him for the first time. Shin Jae-wook sat behind a massive desk, sharp features and dark eyes that seemed to see right through me. He was exactly as terrifying as I'd imagined. You have something for me, he said, and the way he said it made it sound like he already knew everything about me. I placed the envelope on his desk with trembling hands. From my father. He picked it up but didn't open it, studying me instead. You came alone, with a cane, and you're not afraid? I'm terrified, I admitted. But I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not in my family, I said before I could stop myself. Something flickered in his expression. Why would your family send you to deliver this? You're clearly not a messenger. Because I'm expendable, I said, the truth spilling out. If you kill me, it doesn't matter. I'm just the disabled brother who's a burden anyway. The silence that followed was absolute. Shin Jae-wook's expression went completely still. Expendable, he repeated softly, dangerously. Your family considers you expendable. Yes, I whispered. He stood slowly, and I instinctively stepped back. But he didn't approach. He just looked at me like I was a puzzle he was solving. You have silver hair. Natural? Yes. And your name means virtuous longevity. Yes, I said, wondering how he knew. But your family sees nothing virtuous in your endurance. They see weakness. He opened the envelope, read the document. His jaw tightened slightly. Your father is asking me for a significant favor. Tell me, Hyun-soo, what happens if I refuse? What happens to you? Nothing. I go home, and life continues as it always has. And if I accept it? The same. Either way, I'm not part of whatever this is. I'm just the person they send when they need someone who doesn't matter. He set the document down and looked at me for a long moment. You matter, he said with absolute certainty. You don't know me, I said. I know enough. I know you walked into my fortress expecting to die and did it anyway. I know your family sent you here as a sacrifice and you accepted it without fighting back. I know you've been enduring their cruelty for so long you think it's normal. He paused. And I know you're my fated mate. The world stopped. What? You felt it the moment you walked in, he said. So did I. I had felt something. A pull I'd tried to ignore. A recognition that didn't make sense. That's impossible, I whispered. Is it? He walked around the desk, moving slowly so I wouldn't bolt. Your family sent you here to die, Hyun-soo. Instead, they just gave me the one thing in this world I'd protect with everything I have. He was standing in front of me now, close enough that I could smell his scent, cedar and smoke. I'm accepting your father's request, he said quietly. But you need to understand something. From this moment forward, you're under my protection. Your family will never use you as a sacrifice again. I stared at him, unable to process what was happening. Go home, he said. Act like nothing changed, but know that I'm watching now. And the next time they try to hurt you, there will be consequences. I left his fortress in a daze, my mind reeling. The most dangerous man in Seoul had just claimed me as his mate. And somehow, for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible anymore. The first sign that Shin Jae-wook meant what he said came 3 days later when I checked my bank account and found a deposit I couldn't explain. It wasn't a massive amount. Nothing that would draw immediate suspicion. But it was enough to cover 3 months of my medication and physical therapy sessions that I'd been skipping because I couldn't afford them. The deposit memo simply read, medical expenses, with no sender information. I stared at my phone screen for 10 minutes, my heart racing. There was only one person who would know I needed that exact amount. Only one person who had the resources to deposit money into my account without leaving a trace. I thought about calling him, demanding an explanation, but I didn't have his number. He'd never given it to me. He just sent me home with that quiet promise that he was watching. Apparently, he meant it literally. The second sign came a week later when Mina's personal assistant, a woman named Hae-rin, who took particular pleasure in making my errand runs as difficult as possible, was suddenly fired. Mina came home raging about it, throwing her designer bag across the apartment while Sang-hoon tried to calm her down. She was perfect, Mina complained. She knew exactly how I liked things, and they just let her go without warning. Said there were irregularities in her background check. I kept my head down and continued organizing her closet like she'd instructed, but my hands were shaking. Hae-rin had been the one who always sent me to the furthest stores, who accidentally gave me the wrong addresses so I'd waste hours searching, who laughed when I struggled with heavy packages, and now she was gone. The third sign came when the boutique grocery store that sold Mina's expensive sparkling water suddenly started offering delivery service. The manager personally called Mina to inform her that she no longer needed to send anyone to pick up orders, they would bring them directly to her door. Mina was delighted. I was terrified, because I knew exactly who had made that call happen. I knew who had quietly removed every small cruelty from my daily routine without asking for anything in return. Shin Jae-wook was cleaning my path, removing obstacles I'd learned to accept as permanent fixtures of my life. He was doing it silently, carefully, making sure nothing could be traced back to him or raise questions I couldn't answer. But the most significant change came 2 weeks after my visit to his fortress, when my father called me to his study again. I expected another suicide mission, another impossible task designed to put me in danger. Instead, he told me I was being removed from Mina's service. "She's complained that you're too slow with the errands," he said, which was a lie, because I'd been doing everything she asked exactly as she demanded. "You'll focus on lighter tasks around the estate, garden maintenance, that sort of thing." I stared at him, shocked. Garden maintenance meant I wouldn't have to climb stairs, wouldn't have to travel across the city, wouldn't have to carry heavy packages that made my legs scream in protest. It meant I could breathe. "Thank you," I managed to say. My father waved me off dismissively. "Don't thank me. Thank whoever convinced the family accountant that we were spending too much on your transportation costs for Mina's errands. Apparently keeping you local is more economical." I left his study knowing that conversation with the family accountant had never happened. Or if it had, it was because someone had made it happen. Someone who was watching. Someone who was protecting me from the shadows. That night, I sat in my small room and finally allowed myself to accept what was happening. Shin Jae-wook had meant every word he'd said. He was watching. He was protecting me. And he was doing it so carefully that my family had no idea their expendable son had become precious to the most dangerous man in Seoul. I didn't know how long this silent guardianship would last. I didn't know what he expected in return. I didn't even know if I'd ever see him again. But for the first time in years, I went to sleep without dreading tomorrow. Because somewhere in this city, someone was making sure I had a tomorrow worth waking up to, and that was more than my own family had ever given me. 3 weeks after the fortress meeting, a package arrived at the Lee estate addressed specifically to me, which was unusual enough that the household staff didn't know what to do with it. I opened it in my room and found a mahogany cane so beautiful, it took my breath away. The wood was polished to a deep shine, the handle carved with an intricate pattern that fit my palm perfectly, and the weight distribution was so precise that when I stood and tested it, my leg immediately felt the difference. There was a small card tucked inside the box with only 4 words written in elegant handwriting. "You deserve better support." No signature, but I didn't need one. I knew exactly who had sent it. I should have refused it, should have sent it back or hidden it away, but I couldn't. My old cane had been functional but plain, a medical device rather than something crafted with care. This new one felt like a gift, like someone had actually thought about what I needed and what would make my life easier. I didn't know then that it had a tracking device embedded in the handle, so subtle and sophisticated that I'd never notice it. I didn't know that Shin Jae-wook could now see exactly where I was at any moment, could make sure I was safe even when I thought I was alone. All I knew was that for the first time, someone had given me something that wasn't a burden or an obligation. Someone had given me support. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Dinner tonight. 7. A car will pick you up." I should have said no. I should have ignored it. Instead, I found myself getting ready, changing into my least worn clothes, and trying to tame my silver hair into something presentable. The car that arrived was sleek and black, the kind that made the household staff whisper and stare. I climbed in before anyone could ask questions, and the driver took me across the city to a restaurant I'd never heard of, the kind of place that didn't have signs, because people who belonged there already knew where it was. Jae-wook was waiting in a private room, and seeing him again made my heart race in a way I'd been trying to deny for weeks. He stood when I entered, his eyes immediately going to the cane in my hand. "It fits well," he observed. "It's perfect," I admitted. "Thank you." "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "We have a lot to discuss." I sat, suddenly nervous. "Like what?" "Like the fact that your family is planning to announce Mina's engagement next month at a gala," he said. "And like the fact that they're going to use you as household staff during the event." I wasn't surprised. That's not unusual. I'm always kept out of sight during family events. "Not anymore," Jae-wook said quietly. "You're going to attend that gala as my guest." I stared at him. "I can't do that. My family would never allow it." "They won't have a choice," he replied. "I'm one of their biggest business partners now. If I request your presence, they'll comply." "Why?" I asked. "Why are you doing all of this?" He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "Because you're mine, Hyun-soo. Because the moment you walked into my fortress, something in me recognized something in you. Because I've spent 3 weeks watching your family treat you like you're nothing, and I'm done allowing it. I'm not nothing, I said quietly. I know, he said. But they need to learn that, and they're going to learn it at that gala when you walk in beside me, and they realize the expendable son they've been abusing is under my protection. I looked down at the mahogany cane in my hands, at the symbol of his care and his control. You put a tracker in this, didn't you? He didn't deny it. I needed to know you were safe. That's not protection, I said. That's surveillance. It's both, he admitted. And I won't apologize for it. Your family sent you to me expecting you to die. I'm making sure that never happens again, even if it means watching you every moment. I should have been angry. I should have felt violated. Instead, I felt something else entirely. Seen, protected, precious. What happens at the gala? I asked. You stand beside me, he said simply, and your family learns that you're not alone anymore. We ate dinner in that private room, and for the first time in my life, someone asked me what I wanted instead of telling me what to do. Jae-wook wanted to know about my physical therapy, my medication, my daily routine. He wanted to know what made my leg hurt worse, and what helped. He wanted to know me. And slowly, carefully, I let him. By the time the car took me home that night, something had shifted between us. He was still the underworld king, still dangerous and terrifying, but he was also becoming something else. He was becoming mine, the same way he insisted I was his, and that was more frightening than anything my family had ever done to me. But I didn't realize how frightening my family could actually be until I overheard the conversation that would change everything. It was 2 weeks before Mina's engagement gala, and I was in the garden doing maintenance work when I heard raised voices coming from my father's study. The window was open, and the conversation drifted out clearly enough that I froze in place, pruning shears forgotten in my hand. We're bankrupt, my father was saying, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. The investments failed. The properties are leveraged beyond recovery. We have nothing left except the appearance of wealth. The Yoon merger, my mother said desperately. If Mina marries Sung-hoon, his family's money will save us. The Yoons aren't stupid, my father snapped. They'll do due diligence before the wedding. They'll discover we're broke, and they'll call off the engagement. We'll be ruined publicly. There was a long silence. Then Mina's voice, cold and calculating in a way that made my blood run cold. What about the insurance policy? What insurance policy? Sang-hoon asked. The one father took out on the estate's valuable contents. Mina said, art, jewelry, documents. It's worth enough to cover our immediate debts and maintain appearances until after the wedding. We can't just claim the insurance without cause, my mother said. They'll investigate. Then we create a cause, Mina replied. A theft. Something valuable goes missing. We report it stolen, collect the insurance money, and blame it on someone who can't defend themselves. The silence that followed told me exactly who they were thinking of. Hyun-soo, my father said slowly. We could frame Hyun-soo. He's perfect, Mina agreed, and I could hear the smile in her voice. He has access to the house. He's always been unstable. And honestly, who would question it? The disappointing son with nothing to lose steals from his own family out of resentment. He'd be arrested, my mother said, but she didn't sound concerned, just thoughtful. Exactly, Mina said. He'd be out of our lives permanently. We'd get the insurance money, and the Yoons would see us as victims rather than failures. It's perfect. What about evidence? Sung-hoon asked. We plant it in his room, Mina said simply. Some of Mother's jewelry, maybe one of the paintings. We discover it, call the police, and let nature take its course. He'll deny it, my father said. Of course he will, Mina replied. But who will they believe? A respected family reporting a theft? Or a disabled Omega with a history of being difficult and resentful? We'll say he's been acting strange, stealing small things, that we've been worried about his mental state. I stood in the garden, my hands shaking so badly I dropped the pruning shears. They were planning to destroy me. Not just humiliate me or ignore me, but actually frame me for a crime, send me to prison, erase me from their lives completely. And they were discussing it with the casual efficiency of people planning a dinner party. I picked up the shears with trembling hands and forced myself to keep working, to act like I hadn't heard anything. But my mind was racing. I had 2 weeks before the gala, 2 weeks before they planned to execute this scheme. 2 weeks to figure out how to survive my own family's betrayal. That night, I pulled out my phone and stared at the number Jae-wook had given me during our dinner. The one he'd told me to use if I ever needed him. I'd been too proud to call it, too determined to handle my family on my own. But this wasn't something I could handle alone. This was a conspiracy to destroy my entire life, and I needed help. I typed out a message. They're planning to frame me for insurance fraud. I need to see you. His response came within seconds. Tomorrow, same restaurant. I'll send the car. I deleted the messages and tried to sleep, but all I could think about was the casual cruelty in Mina's voice as she'd planned my destruction. All I could think about was how easily my family had decided I was expendable enough to sacrifice for their financial problems. I'd always known they didn't love me, but I hadn't realized they hated me enough to destroy me completely. The next evening, I told the household staff I was going for physical therapy and climbed into Jae-wook's car. He was waiting in the same private room, but this time his expression was darker, more dangerous. Tell me everything, he said the moment I sat down. I did. I told him about the bankruptcy, about the Yoon merger, about their plan to plant evidence and frame me. I told him about Mina's cold calculation and my father's easy agreement. By the time I finished, Jae-wook's jaw was so tight, I thought it might crack. They're planning to do this at the gala, I said. They'll discover the theft during the event, make a scene, and have me arrested in front of all their guests. Maximum humiliation, maximum believability. No, Jae-wook said quietly, and the word carried absolute authority. They're not going to touch you. How can you stop them? I asked. They have everything planned. So do I, he replied. You're going to that gala as my guest, exactly as we discussed. And when they try to frame you, I'm going to make sure the truth comes out instead. What truth? That your family is bankrupt, that they're committing insurance fraud, and that they're trying to destroy an innocent person to cover their own crimes, he said. I've been investigating their finances since you first came to my fortress. I have documentation of every failed investment, every hidden debt, every lie they've told to maintain their reputation. I stared at him. You've been investigating my family for 3 weeks. I've been protecting you, he corrected. And part of that protection means knowing exactly who's trying to hurt you and how to stop them. If you expose them at the gala, it'll destroy them, I said. Yes, he agreed. It will. They're still my family, I said weakly. They stopped being your family the moment they decided to frame you for a crime and send you to prison, Jae-wook replied. Now they're just people who need to learn that you're not expendable, that you're protected, that you're mine. He reached across the table and took my hand, and I realized my fingers were trembling. 2 weeks, he said. In 2 weeks, your family is going to try to destroy you at that gala, and instead, they're going to learn exactly what happens when someone tries to hurt what belongs to me. I looked at our joined hands, at the mahogany cane resting against my chair, at the man who'd turned my entire life upside down in 3 weeks. I'm scared, I admitted. Good, he said. Fear means you understand the stakes, but you're not facing this alone anymore. You have me, and I promise you, Hyun-soo, no one touches you without answering to me. I believed him, and that belief was the only thing that got me through the next 2 weeks as I watched my family prepare for the gala that was supposed to be my destruction. They had no idea it was going to be theirs instead. The night of the gala arrived with all the elegant cruelty I'd been expecting, and I walked into the Lee Estate's grand ballroom on Jae-wook's arm, feeling like I was stepping into a trap that had been carefully set just for me. The guests stared at us with open shock. Lee Hyun-soo, the invisible son who was usually kept in the servants' quarters during family events, arriving with Shin Jae-wook, the most feared man in Seoul. My parents' faces went pale when they saw us, and Mina's expression shifted from surprise to barely concealed rage. But they couldn't refuse us entry. Jae-wook was too powerful, too important to their business connections. So they smiled through clenched teeth and welcomed us, and I felt Jae-wook's hand tighten protectively on my arm as we walked past them. Remember, he murmured quietly, no matter what happens, stay beside me. Don't run, don't apologize, don't let them make you small. I nodded, my fingers gripping my mahogany cane. The tracking device hidden inside it felt like a tether to safety, a reminder that even if everything went wrong, Jae-wook would know where I was. The first hour of the gala was almost peaceful. Jae-wook introduced me to business associates who treated me with a respect I'd never experienced, who asked my opinion on things and actually listened when I answered. It was surreal, like stepping into a parallel world where I was a person instead of a ghost. Then Mina approached with Sang-hoon, both of them dressed in designer perfection and wearing smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Hyun-soo, Mina said sweetly, we need to talk. Privately. Oak, anything you need to say to him, you can say in front of me, Jae-wook said calmly. Mina's smile tightened. It's a family matter. Surely you understand. I understand that your brother is my guest, Jae-wook replied. And he stays where I can see him. The tension was thick enough to cut, but before it could escalate further, my mother's scream pierced through the ballroom. My diamond necklace! It's gone! The room went silent. My mother stood near the coat check area, her hand at her throat where an expensive diamond necklace should have been. Someone stole it. It was right here on the table where I left it. I felt ice run through my veins. This was it. This was the moment they'd planned. Everyone stay calm, my father announced, his voice carrying authority. No one leaves until we find it. This necklace is a family heirloom worth millions. Security guards moved to block the exits. Guests began murmuring, some checking their own belongings, and Mina's eyes locked onto me with calculated precision. Hyun-soo, she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. You were near that table earlier. Did you see anything? No, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I haven't been near the coat check all evening. Are you sure? Sang-hoon asked, his tone suggesting he didn't believe me. Because several people mentioned seeing you walk past that area. I walked past it to get to the restroom, I said. I didn't touch anything. Then you won't mind if we check your pockets, Mina said sweetly. Jae-wook's hand moved to my shoulder. That's enough. This is a family matter, my father interjected, walking toward us with security guards flanking him. If my son has nothing to hide, a simple check will clear this up. Your son is my guest, Jae-wook repeated, his voice taking on that dangerous edge that made people instinctively step back. And you're not touching him. We're not accusing him, my mother said, though her eyes said otherwise. We're just being thorough. Surely Hyun-soo understands that we need to check everyone. Then check everyone, Jae-wook said. Start with your daughter and her fiancé. Mina's face flushed. How dare you suggest? I'm not suggesting anything, Jae-wook interrupted. I'm pointing out that if you're checking guests for theft, you start with family members who have the most access. This is ridiculous, Sang-hoon said. Hyun-soo has always been resentful of this family. Everyone knows he's unstable. Unstable? I said, finally finding my voice. I've done nothing but serve this family for years. Serve us? Mina laughed cruelly. Is that what you call stealing mother's jewelry out of spite? I didn't steal anything, I said. Then prove it, my father said. Let security check your belongings. If you're innocent, this will be over in minutes. I looked at Jae-wook, who gave me a small nod. He knew something I didn't, something that made him confident enough to let this play out. Fine, I said. Check my pockets. A security guard approached carefully, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. He checked my jacket pockets, found nothing. He checked my pants pockets, found nothing. Mina's expression flickered with something like panic before she schooled it back to concern. What about his cane? He could have hidden it in there. My cane? I said, gripping the mahogany handle. It's hollow, isn't it? Mina pressed. Custom made. Perfect for hiding something small and valuable. Jae-wook's eyes narrowed dangerously. You're not touching his cane. We're trying to find a stolen family heirloom, my father said. Surely you understand the seriousness of this situation. I understand perfectly, Jae-wook said. I understand that you're attempting to frame your own son for insurance fraud to cover your bankruptcy. The ballroom went absolutely silent. My parents' faces drained of color. That's absurd, my mother said weakly. Is it? Jae-wook asked. Then you won't mind if I have my people examine your financial records. The ones that show 3 failed investments, 2 underwater properties, and enough debt to bury your family for generations? How dare you, my father started. Check the cane, Mina interrupted desperately. Just check it and this will all be over. Before Jae-wook could stop her, she lunged forward and grabbed my mahogany cane, yanking it from my hand with such force that I stumbled. Sang-hoon caught my arm to steady me, but his grip was too tight, deliberately painful. Let go of him, Jae-wook said, and his voice was quiet death. Mina smashed my cane against the marble fountain in the center of the ballroom. The wood splintered, pieces scattering across the floor. She rifled through the broken pieces, searching frantically for the necklace that wasn't there. Because it was never supposed to be there. It was supposed to be in my room, planted by them, discovered later after I'd been publicly accused and humiliated. But their plan had fallen apart the moment Jae-wook challenged them to check everyone, the moment they'd had to improvise. "It's not here," the security guard said quietly, examining the broken cane pieces. "Then he must have hidden it somewhere else," Mina insisted. "In his room, or he passed it to someone. Or, Jae-wook interrupted, "your mother is lying about the necklace being stolen because you're committing insurance fraud." "Get out," my father said, his voice shaking with rage. "Get out of my house." "Gladly," Jae-wook said. He turned to me. "Can you walk without the cane?" I looked at the shattered mahogany pieces on the floor, at the tracking device now visible among the splinters, at the symbol of Jae-wook's care destroyed by my sister's desperate cruelty. "Yes," I said, though my leg was already aching. Jae-wook put his arm around me, supporting my weight. "Then let's go." "He's not leaving," my mother said. "He lives here. This is his home." "This was never his home," Jae-wook replied. "And he's not coming back." "You can't just take him," Mina said. "He's our family." "He stopped being your family the moment you tried to destroy him," Jae-wook said. He looked at me. "Unless you want to stay." I looked at my parents, at Mina, at the ballroom full of witnesses who'd just watched my family try to frame me for theft. I looked at the broken cane, at the life I'd endured for so long. "No," I said. "I'm ready to go home." "You don't have a home," my father said viciously. "You have nothing. You are nothing." "He has me," Jae-wook said simply, "and that's more than you'll ever have again." We started walking toward the exit, my legs screaming with every step, but my head held high. Behind us, I heard my mother calling my name, heard Mina shouting something about calling the police. Then we were outside, and it was raining, and I couldn't walk any further. My leg gave out, and I sank down onto the marble steps, the pieces of my shattered cane still clutched in my hand. "I can't," I said, tears mixing with rain. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can," Jae-wook said, kneeling beside me. "You already did. You stood up to them. You walked away. Now, you just need to make one call." He pressed his phone into my hand, and that's when I finally broke, when I finally let myself admit that I couldn't do this alone anymore. "Jae-wook, they're trying to take everything," I said into the phone, even though he was right beside me. "I'm ready to come home." I spoke into the phone even though he was right beside me, and he understood what I needed, what I was asking for without words. He stood up, pulled me to my feet, and said quietly, "Wait here. I need to go back inside." "I need to go back inside." "What? Why?" I asked, but he was already walking back toward the ballroom entrance, his phone pressed to his ear making calls I couldn't hear. I sat there in the rain, shaking and broken, watching the ballroom windows glow with warm light while I sat outside in the cold. Just like always, just like I'd always been, on the outside looking in at a family that had never wanted me. Then I heard the cars arrive. 3 black sedans pulled up to the estate entrance, and men in expensive suits emerged. Not security guards, not hired muscle. These were Jae-wook's people, the kind of men whose presence changed the atmosphere of a room just by existing. They walked past me with respectful nods, entering the ballroom like they owned it. And maybe they did. Maybe Jae-wook owned everything in this city, including my family's precious gala and their carefully constructed lies. I heard the music stop inside, heard the sudden silence that meant something significant was happening. Then Jae-wook's voice, amplified somehow, carrying through the open doors with absolute authority. "Good evening. I apologize for the interruption, but there's been a misunderstanding that needs immediate correction." I forced myself to stand, to limp to the doorway so I could see what was happening. The ballroom had gone completely silent. Every guest stood frozen, glasses of champagne forgotten in their hands. Mina and Sang-hoon were pale. My parents looked like they were facing execution, and Jae-wook stood in the center of it all, commanding the space without raising his voice or making threats. He didn't need to. His presence alone was threat enough. The security guards who'd been blocking exits now stood at attention along the walls, clearly recognizing they answered to a higher authority now. Jae-wook's men had positioned themselves strategically throughout the room, not aggressive but unmistakably present. The Lee family has accused my guest of theft, Jae-wook continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. They destroyed his mobility aid in front of you all, humiliated him publicly, and attempted to frame him for a crime he didn't commit. This is a private family matter, my father started. It stopped being private the moment you involved 200 witnesses, Jae-wook said calmly. And it stopped being a family matter the moment you decided to commit insurance fraud using your own son as a scapegoat. The guests began murmuring. My mother's hand went to her throat, to the place where the necklace allegedly stolen should have been. I don't know what you're talking about, she said weakly. Don't you? Jae-wook asked. He gestured, and one of his men stepped forward with a tablet. Perhaps this will refresh your memory. Financial records showing the Lee family is bankrupt. Investment portfolios showing 3 major failures in the past year. Property assessments showing every asset you own is leveraged beyond recovery. He turned to address the room. The Lee family is broke. They're using tonight's engagement announcement to secure a merger with the Yoon family that will save them from financial ruin. But they needed to generate immediate cash to maintain appearances until the wedding. So they planned to stage a theft, collect the insurance money, and blame it on the family member they consider most expendable. That's absurd, Mina said, but her voice shook. Is it? Jae-wook asked. Then explain why your mother's stolen necklace is currently in the safe in your father's study. Explain why the insurance claim paperwork was prepared 3 days ago, before the theft allegedly occurred. Explain why you planted matching jewelry in Hyun-soo's room this morning, ready to be discovered by police. The silence was deafening. How did you... My father started. I own this city, Jae-wook said simply. Did you really think I wouldn't know what you were planning? Did you really think I'd let you destroy him? He turned to look at me standing in the doorway, soaked and shaking, and his expression softened just slightly. Lee Hyun-soo is under my protection, he announced to the room. Anyone who harms him, frames him, or treats him as expendable will answer to me personally, and I believe everyone here understands what that means. The guests nodded silently. They understood perfectly. As for the Lee family, Jae-wook continued, turning back to my parents, you have 2 choices. You can drop this fraudulent theft claim, release Hyun-soo from any obligation to this family, and face your bankruptcy with whatever dignity you have left. Or, I can release these financial records to every media outlet in Seoul, along with evidence of your insurance fraud scheme, and watch you face criminal charges. You can't do this, my mother whispered. I already have, Jae-wook replied. The only question is whether you accept it quietly or make it worse for yourselves. My father's shoulders sagged in defeat. Mina looked like she wanted to attack someone but couldn't figure out who. Sang-hoon had gone completely silent, probably calculating how quickly he could distance himself from this disaster. Now, Jae-wook said, his voice dropping to something dangerously soft. I'm going to walk out of here with Hyun-soo. You're going to let us leave. You're going to tell your guests that there was a misunderstanding, and you're never going to contact him again. He's our son, my mother said. He was your scapegoat, Jae-wook corrected. Now he's mine to protect, and believe me, I take that responsibility very seriously. He walked toward me, the crowd parting silently to let him through. When he reached the doorway, he took off his jacket and wrapped it around my shoulders, shielding me from the rain and from the stares of 200 witnesses who'd just watched my family's complete destruction. Can you walk? He asked quietly. No, I admitted. They broke my cane. Then I'll carry you, he said simply. And before I could protest, he lifted me into his arms like I weighed nothing. The last thing I saw as we left the Lee estate was Mina's face, twisted with rage and humiliation, watching the disabled brother she'd tormented walk away in the arms of the most powerful man in Seoul. The broken, expendable Omega she'd tried to destroy was leaving with everything, while she was left with nothing but her shattered pride and her family's exposed lies. And I felt absolutely no sympathy for her at all, especially when I realized Jae-wook wasn't taking me to his car, but rather to a room the Lee family had set aside for VIP guests during the gala. What are we doing? I asked, as he set me down carefully on a sofa. Waiting, he said, checking his phone. The press will be here in about 5 minutes. My stomach dropped. The press? Jae-wook, what did you do? I told you I was going to dismantle them, he said calmly. Did you think I meant privately? Before I could respond, my father burst into the room with Mina and my mother trailing behind him. "You can't do this," he said desperately. "If you bring the media into this, you'll destroy us completely." "That's the point," Jae-wook replied, without looking up from his phone. "We'll give you anything," my mother pleaded. "Money, business connections, whatever you want. Just don't involve the press." "You don't have money," Jae-wook reminded her. "You're bankrupt, remember? And I don't need your connections. I have my own." Mina looked at me with pure hatred. "This is all your fault. You brought him here, you turned him against us, you ruined everything." "No," I said quietly. "You ruined everything when you decided to frame me for insurance fraud. I just stopped letting you get away with it." "You ungrateful," Mina started, but Jae-wook cut her off with a single look that made her take a step back. "Choose your next words very carefully," he said softly, "because I'm still deciding whether to press criminal charges or just destroy you financially and socially." The sound of car doors slamming and voices in the hallway announced the press's arrival. My father's face went ashen. "Please, we're begging you, don't do this." "You should have thought about that before you tried to send your son to prison," Jae-wook said. He stood and buttoned his jacket. "Now, you have two options. You can go out there and confess to the insurance fraud scheme, apologize to Hyun-soo publicly, and accept whatever consequences follow. Or I can go out there and present the evidence myself, and you'll have no control over the narrative." "You're a monster," my mother whispered. "No," Jae-wook corrected. "I'm someone who protects what's mine. You're the monsters who tried to destroy your own child to save yourselves." He walked to the door and opened it. Flashing cameras and shouted questions filled the hallway. "Mr. Shin, is it true the Lee family is bankrupt? What's this about insurance fraud? Where is Lee Hyun-soo?" Jae-wook raised his hand, and the press quieted immediately, recognizing his authority. "I'll make a brief statement," he said. "The Lee family has been operating under financial insolvency for approximately 1 year. Tonight, they attempted to stage a theft of valuable jewelry, to collect insurance money, and frame their disabled son, Lee Hyun-soo, as the perpetrator." The cameras went crazy, flashing and clicking while reporters shouted follow-up questions. My family stood frozen behind Jae-wook, trapped between him and the media feeding frenzy. "I have documented evidence of their bankruptcy," Jae-wook continued, "including failed investments, underwater properties, and falsified financial statements provided to the Yoon family as part of merger negotiations. I also have evidence of the premeditated fraud scheme, including insurance paperwork filed before the alleged theft occurred and jewelry planted in Hyun-soo's room to frame him." "Mr. Lee, is this true?" A reporter called out to my father. My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at my mother, at Mina, at the cameras documenting their complete humiliation. "It's true," I said, and everyone turned to look at me. I was still sitting on the sofa, wrapped in Jae-wook's jacket, but my voice was steady. "They plan to frame me because they consider me expendable. They've treated me as a servant in my own family for years. Tonight was just the culmination of that cruelty." "Hyun-soo, don't," my mother pleaded. "Why not?" I asked. "You were willing to send me to prison. Why shouldn't I tell the truth?" The cameras captured everything. My family's horror, my calm revelation. Jae-wook standing beside me like a guardian, ensuring my words were heard and protected. "The Lee family will be issuing a formal statement," Jae-wook said. "But know this, Lee Hyun-soo is under my personal protection. Anyone who publishes false information about him, anyone who attempts to frame him or harm him in any way, will answer to me directly." The threat was clear. The press nodded understanding. In Seoul, everyone knew what Shin Jae-wook's protection meant. "Now get out," Jae-wook said to my family. "You have a statement to prepare and a bankruptcy to face." My father, my mother, and Mina fled the room like beaten dogs, leaving me alone with Jae-wook and the distant sound of reporters already filing their stories. "It's done," Jae-wook said softly. "They can't touch you anymore." I looked up at him, this dangerous man who dismantled my entire family in one night to protect me. "What happens now?" "Now," he said, "I take you home. My home, where you belong." And for the first time in my life, the word home didn't fill me with dread. It filled me with something else entirely. Hope. That's what I felt as Jae-wook carried me out of the Lee estate for the last time. Past the reporters who were already writing headlines that would destroy my family's reputation by morning, past the guests who'd witnessed everything, past the life I'd endured for so long. The sedan was waiting, warm and quiet, a sanctuary from the chaos we'd left behind. Jae-wook settled me in the back seat with careful gentleness that contradicted everything the city believed about him, and then we were driving away from the estate, from Mina's rage, from my parents' desperation, from all of it. Where are we going? I asked. Home, he said simply. My home. Yours now, if you want it. I looked out the window at Seoul passing by, at the city that had always felt hostile and cold. What happens to them? To my family? The truth happens to them, Jae-wook said. The press will publish the story. The Yoon family will cancel the merger, and probably the engagement. Your parents will face bankruptcy proceedings. Mina will discover what it's like to fall from society's graces. And me? I asked. You, he said, turning to look at me with those dark, intense eyes, will never be invisible again. You'll never be expendable. You'll never be treated as less than you are. What am I? I whispered. Mine, he said. My mate. My partner. The one person in this city I'd burn everything to protect. The car pulled up to his fortress, the compound that had terrified me 3 months ago when I'd walked in expecting to die. Now it felt different. Now it felt like coming home. Jae-wook carried me inside, through hallways I half remembered from that first visit, to a suite of rooms that took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that looked both expensive and comfortable, and in the corner, a collection of mahogany canes in various styles. I had them made, he said, following my gaze. Different weights, different heights, different grips, until your leg heals enough that you don't need one anymore. It's not going to heal, I said quietly. The injury was permanent. Then you'll have the best canes in Seoul, he replied. And anyone who ever makes you feel less than whole because of it will regret it. I looked at this dangerous man who'd destroyed my family to save me, who'd tracked my movements to keep me safe, who'd given me canes and protection and something I'd never had before. I don't know how to be what you need, I admitted. You already are, he said. You walked into my fortress expecting death and faced me with honesty. You endured years of cruelty without breaking. You stood up to your family when they tried to destroy you. You're stronger than you know, Hyun-soo. I'm broken, I said. You're resilient, he corrected. There's a difference. He sat beside me on the sofa, close enough that I could feel his warmth. The city will talk about us, he said. They'll say I stole the Lee family's disabled son. They'll question why someone like me would protect someone like you. They'll whisper and speculate and judge. I know, I said. But they'll also learn something important, he continued. They'll learn that you're not just under my protection. You're my equal, my partner. And anyone who disrespects you, disrespects me. I'm not your equal, I said. You rule this city. I'm just the person I rule it for, he interrupted. Every decision I make, every business I control, every alliance I form, it's all to build something worth protecting. And you're what's worth protecting, Hyun-soo. You're the one line no one crosses. I stared at him, processing what he was saying. You're making me a target. I'm making you untouchable, he corrected. There's a difference. Over the next few weeks, I learned exactly what he meant. The press coverage of my family's fraud was brutal and thorough. The Lee estate was seized for bankruptcy proceedings. Mina's engagement was publicly canceled with a scathing statement from the Yoon family about fraudulent financial disclosures. My parents became social pariahs overnight, and I became something else entirely. Jae-wook didn't hide me away in his fortress. Instead, he brought me to business meetings where I sat beside him and learned how his empire actually worked. He introduced me to his associates as his partner, not his ward or his charity case. He asked for my opinion on financial decisions and actually listened to my analysis. The city that had ignored me for years suddenly couldn't stop staring. Lee Hyun-soo, the disabled Omega who'd been treated as invisible, was now sitting at the right hand of Seoul's most powerful man, walking beside him with custom mahogany canes. Attending events where people treated me with respect, born of fear of what Jae-wook would do if they didn't. They're afraid of you, I told him one night, as we returned from a business dinner where men twice my age had deferred to my judgment. Good, he said. Fear keeps you safe. Is that all this is? I asked. Fear? He pulled the car over, right there on the street, and turned to look at me. Do you think I dismantled your family out of fear? Do you think I tracked your movements, removed your obstacles, gave you protection out of some calculated business decision? I don't know, I admitted. I did it because the moment you walked into my office 3 months ago, something in me recognized something in you, he said. Because you're my fated mate, and I don't care if you believe in that or not, because I feel it every time I look at you. Because you're the one person in this city I'd choose over power, over control, over everything. You barely know me, I whispered. I know you survived a family that tried to destroy you. I know you walked into danger expecting death and faced it with dignity. I know you're brilliant at financial analysis when anyone bothers to listen to you. I know you're stronger than anyone who's ever underestimated you. He reached over and took my hand. And I know that I'd burn this entire city to ash before I let anyone hurt you again. I looked at our joined hands, at the man who'd saved me, and terrified me in equal measure. What if I can't love you the way you want? Then I'll take whatever you can give, he said simply. But I think you're underestimating yourself again. I think you already do, you're just afraid to admit it. He was right. I was afraid. Afraid of this intensity, this protection, this belonging that I'd never experienced before. Afraid that if I let myself believe in it, it would be taken away. But Jae-wook wasn't my family. He wasn't going to discard me when I became inconvenient. He'd proven that by destroying everything to keep me safe. Take me home, I said quietly. We're almost there, he said, starting the car again. No, I corrected. I mean, I'm already home. Wherever you are, that's home now. His expression softened in a way that made him look less like the underworld king and more like the man who'd knelt in the rain to carry me away from my family's cruelty. Then welcome home, Hyun-soo, he said. And I promise you, no one will ever make you feel invisible again. 6 months later, I stood in Jae-wook's office overlooking the city that had once treated me like I didn't exist. My mahogany cane rested against the desk where I'd been reviewing contracts for a new business acquisition. I'd learned that I had a gift for seeing patterns in financial data, for identifying risks and opportunities that others missed. Jae-wook valued that gift. He'd made me a legitimate partner in his business operations, not just his mate, but his equal in the empire he'd built. The Lee family had disappeared from high society completely. Last I'd heard, my parents were living in a small apartment, and my father was working a regular job for the first time in his life. Mina had married someone far beneath her former standards, desperate to escape the shame of her family's fall. I felt no satisfaction in their destruction. I felt nothing for them at all. They were strangers now. People who'd once tried to break me and failed. You're thinking too hard, Jae-wook said, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. Just remembering, I said. The gala? He asked. Everything before it, I admitted. How invisible I used to be. How expendable they made me feel. And now? He prompted. Now I'm the person standing beside the king, I said. The one line nobody crosses, the broken Omega who turned out to be anything but. You were never broken, he said against my neck. You were just waiting for someone to see your worth. I turned in his arms and looked at this dangerous, protective, impossible man who'd changed everything. Thank you, I said, for seeing me. Always, he promised. For the rest of our lives, Hyun-soo, I'll always see you. And I believed him. Because Shin Jae-wook didn't make promises he couldn't keep, the disabled Omega my family had tried to destroy was now ruling Seoul from the shadows beside the underworld king. And I'd never felt more powerful in my life.